The Buffalo Bills defensive end room could look a lot different in 2024 with some key decisions to be made. We're breaking down those dynamics today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, folks, we are going to continue our performance review series today with the Buffalo Bills defensive ends. And obviously, there's a lot to get into. Some young players, some expiring contracts, some old players that are looking like bad contracts. We got to talk about it all here on the podcast. So we'll start with Greg Rousseau and Von Miller. Then I want to get into the expiring contracts of AJ Epenesa and Leonard Floyd. Then we'll finish it off with Shaq Lawson, Kingsley Jonathan, and an overview on what Brandon Beane needs to accomplish this offseason at the defensive end position. Let's start with Gregory Rousseau, a 2021 first-round pick, number 30 overall. Rousseau is 23. He turns 24 in April. He's entering year 4 of his 4-year, $11.6 million contract, and the Bills do have a decision to make regarding his 5th-year option. So every first-round pick has a 5th-year option baked into their contract, and it's Greg Rousseau's turn for the Bills to consider that. They'll have until early May to make this decision, but here's the choice. You either allow this to be the final year of Greg Rousseau's deal, right, and he would become a free agent after the season, or you can pick up the 5th-year option, and that amount of salary is different for every player based on playing time and different Pro Bowl honors that they've received and not. For Greg Rousseau, we know what that number is going to be. It's $12.2 million. So if the Bills want to go ahead and pick that up in 2025, Rousseau will count $12.2 million against the Bills' salary cap. To me, this is a very, very, very easy yes. And again, the Bills have until early May to decide on that, but I think Greg Rousseau is on a terrific path, and I would not think twice about picking up that $12.2 million 5th-year option. In terms of statistical output in 2023, Rousseau played in 16 games with 16 starts. He did not play in the Jaguars game in London. In those 16 games, was on the field for 60% of the snaps, 42 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 55 pressures, and 5 quarterback sacks. To me, in terms of his 2023 review, I think he had a really solid season. He continues to prove himself as a top-tier run defender in the NFL. I think he's one of the best run-stopping defensive ends in the entire NFL. I'll be honest with you, coming off of 8 sacks in 2022, I was hopeful for more than 5 this season, but I think we have to be mindful of the foot injury that he suffered in week 4. He sat out week 5, and then he played through a pretty meaningful foot injury the rest of the season, which I think took away a bit from his pass rushing ability. I still love the trajectory that he's on. I love the technique that he plays with. I love how smart he is as a football player. I feel very comfortable with Greg Rousseau and him being an answer and a foundational piece for this Bills defense. As for his 2024 outlook, this will be his age 24 season, and that's exciting because it's his age 24 season with 3 years of experience under his belt. Now, obviously, this is a big season for him. It could be very meaningful. It will be very, very meaningful in really setting the parameters for what a contract extension could look like if he does take another step. And I think you could see an Ed Oliver type situation here where before Ed Oliver actually played on the 5th-year option this past season, the Bills signed him to a long-term extension, and it wound up being a big-time value deal. And that would be one more year for Greg Rousseau, but this is that foundational year for Greg Rousseau in terms of, what a contract extension could look like next offseason, and that'll help the Bills potentially. You would take that $12.2 million 5th-year option tag, bring it down, and, extend some of that out. So there's some great opportunities there with the deal, but it's an important year for Rousseau. I'm looking for him to become a more clutch player. I think he's a good player overall, but you're looking for the big impact in the big moments, right? And I thought he was probably the Bills' best defensive lineman against Kansas City. Unfortunate that, like, on the first or second play of the game, Patrick Mahomes was able to spin out of a sack attempt that he had. But I think the big thing for Greg Rousseau is keep doing what you're doing, defend the run, create that pressure. But we need those big-time sacks, those big-time tackles for loss to show up a little bit more consistently in some of these high-stakes games. So I think that's the big thing for Rousseau, and I think he can certainly get there. He's very physically gifted. He's very young. He's gaining experience. He's wired the right way. I'm excited for where he's going. All right, now let's talk about Von Miller, a 2022 free agent signing, 34 years old. He turns 35 in March, entering year 3 of his 6-year, $120 million contract. And I know that there's a lot of people that would love for the Bills to get out of this contract, and there's just not a great opportunity to do that. So if Von Miller were to retire or the Bills were to cut him, it's just not good. The Bills would be looking at over $32 million in wasted cap space just to not have Von Miller on the team. When you take the dead cap hit plus the way the contract is structured and how much he counts against the cost, it's like $40 million actually just for him to not be on the team. You're not going to do that. If you do something with him after June 1st, you could then spread the dead cap hit over 2 seasons instead of 1. But why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? I think there's definitely a more favorable opportunity to get out of the deal after next season. But the reality is the best possible result for Von Miller right now is for him to get healthy and be close to what Von Miller is supposed to be this season for the Bills, because you can't just pay $40 million against your cap to just not have Von Miller. That doesn't make any sense. Now, there is the other side of the coin where you could restructure the contract, do a base salary restructure, and that would actually save you $12 million in cap space. But I don't think that's a very smart idea because you don't really want to lock yourself in for longer when it comes to this contract. So it's a challenging situation. It's unfortunate as it relates to this contract. But that's the reality of where the Bills are at. There's no great opportunity. So if you think the Bills should cut Von Miller or you're hoping that he retires, that is completely non-beneficial to the Buffalo Bills salary cap. In fact, it's very, very detrimental. 2023, he played in 12 games, didn't start any, 32% of the snaps in the 12 games he played, collected 3 tackles, 0 tackles for loss, 13 pressures, and 0 sacks. As for his 2023 review, it's just unfortunate. Because before the ACL injury, Von Miller was everything Brandon Beane imagined him to be when he signed with the Buffalo Bills. And by every indication, whether it's Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, Eric Washington, Von Miller worked as hard as he possibly could to get back. And we know that when he did return, it never became a meaningful impact. He had a couple of flashes late in the season, but let's just call it what it is. 2023 was a lost season for Von Miller, which is not ideal at age 34, coming off of an ACL tear. As for his 2024 outlook, I mean, it's just fingers crossed. All we can do is hope that as he gets further removed from the injury, that he looks more like what he's supposed to look like. The challenge is that he turns 35 in March. There's a lot to be concerned about, and in terms of really calibrating reasonable expectations, it's hard to do it. I think the dynamics of this offseason could and should be really different. Obviously, last offseason, he spent all of that time rehabbing his knee, and then he tried to play in a football game in week 5 with really no ramp up, right? I know Von Miller's a veteran, but there's still a ramp up. You got to get calloused up. You got to get yourself ready to play. Never really happened, where this should be basically a normal offseason for Von Miller in terms of what he would normally do to get ready to play a season. So it's literally fingers crossed. Hope that Von Miller can be something close to what you expect him to be in 2024. Although I would understand those who have doubt that that would happen, and I don't think you can count on it. And that's what's pretty unfortunate, because this is your big ticket, right? Everybody talks about going all in and doing all that you can and exhausting every resource. The Bills they've done it, and a big part of that has been Von Miller. And he was the big ticket for the last couple of seasons. And unfortunately, you only got from week 1 until Thanksgiving in 2022 of what you anticipated to get from Von Miller. All right, on the other side of it, we're going to talk about Leonard Floyd and AJ Epenesa, a couple of expiring contracts, some interesting dynamics there. We'll break that all down here in just a second, so be sure to stick with me. DoorDash went all out for game day and DoorDashed stuff from all the ads to one lucky winner: cars, snacks, and even tax software. DoorDash is the all-in-one app for your everyday needs, from restaurants and groceries to flowers and gifts. So next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or just time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered right to your front door. Maybe you didn't have a chance to get to the grocery store this past weekend after all the big game commotion, or maybe your bar cart is mysteriously cleared out. We'll stock back up for the week ahead with delivery from DoorDash. Football season may be over, but we're in the thick of basketball games, the school year, and let's face it, winter. I can think of a million reasons daily to order with DoorDash, so hop on the app and make your day a little easier. All right, folks, let's talk Leonard Floyd and AJ Epenesa in this block. Leonard Floyd, a 2023 free agent signing, 31 years old. He turns 32 in September. His contract is expired. He has completed his 1-year, $7 million deal with the Buffalo Bills. 2023, he played in 17 games with 16 starts. In those 17 games, on the field 54% of the snaps, collected 32 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 41 pressures, and 10.5 sacks. As for his 2023 review, it was a great signing by Brandon Beane. Wind up leading the team in sacks, was the first player for the Buffalo Bills to have double-digit sacks since Lorenzo Alexander in 2016, the first double-digit sack guy under Sean McDermott. He also battled injuries throughout the course of the season, had an ankle deal that he was dealing with, and he didn't miss any games, so was able to be durable and play through some stuff. I do think that he faded a bit down the stretch, which is disappointing because 2023 was a year where he played way fewer snaps than he did in the previous 5 seasons. He was like an 80% snap guy for the Rams throughout his stretch with them. And for the Bills, he only played 54% of the snaps. It was like 400 snaps less than what he typically does. And so I didn't love to see him fade down the stretch when you'd like to think he should be about as fresh as he could possibly be relative to previous seasons later in the year. But that said, I mean, he had a career high in sacks despite playing a lot fewer snaps, collecting, like we mentioned already, 10.5 sacks. So for 2024, it's all about the contract, right? And I'm guessing he's looking for a similar type deal that he got from the Bills, which is 1 year, $7 million. The Bills also have 3 void years on the back end of that Leonard Floyd contract. The Bills are going to be paying, like, I think $3.5-4 million in cap space to Leonard Floyd because they just kind of push some of the money into future years. So they're going to commit cap space this year because of the void years added on to the end of that deal. And I think if the Bills were to bring Leonard Floyd back, it'd have to be a very similar situation. So you're just continuing to tie up money into a player. And that's when you're tight against the cap, you're trying to go all in, you're trying to maximize a winning window. These are the levers that you have to pull, but there's consequences. Right now, the Bills have less salary cap space in 2024 because they had to push money to void years with Leonard Floyd when he's not even most likely going to be on your team. And if he is back, that's money still counts. So, it's tough. And the Bills are in a tight situation as it relates to the salary cap, which if anyone tells you isn't real, just mute them. They're not a person you should pay attention to. People that don't understand the salary cap and say it's fake, they don't know football, and they're not worthy of your attention. This is the reality of what this is all about. And Leonard Floyd's a great example of that. So for my 2024 outlook, We are looking at a similar type deal. He's already said that he wants to play for a contender, and he's going where the money is. And, he's going to be 32, trying to maximize the end of his career. I'm not sure if that spot's going to be with Buffalo. He had a nice season for sure, but he's not a player that I'm stressing over bringing back, right? One of my big themes that I told you I was going to be clinging to this offseason is younger and cheaper. Paying a 32-year-old Leonard Floyd does not accomplish your objectives of getting younger and cheaper, and I think the Bills should look to kind of give someone else some opportunity here on the edge, although I thought he had a great season, but I think that's what it needs to be, one great season. AJ Epenesa, 2020 second-round pick, number 54 overall. He's 25 years old. He turns 26 in September. He has completed his rookie contract, a 4-year, $5.9 million contract. And so the fascinating thing with AJ Epenesa is figuring out what his market value is going to be. I think this is one of the most challenging players for me to really project contract-wise what he's going to be looking at this offseason. Spotrac.com says an average annual salary of $5.6 million. That's their projection. To me, that's what makes sense. I do fear that there's going to be a team or teams out there that are willing to overpay for Epenesa. You think about a team like Chicago, who has now Eric Washington as their defensive coordinator, who, of course, has been Epenesa's defensive line coach, and surely Epenesa had his best 2 seasons with Eric Washington. Think about a team like Washington, who has major needs on the edge. They traded away Chase Young and Montez Sweat. They have literally nothing on the edge. They got a defensive-minded coach in Dan Quinn. They have tons of resources. You could see teams out there, the Raiders, right? There's teams with cap space out there that might look at AJ Epenesa and say, here's 3 years, $30 million, right? We saw that happen with both Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips. I fear that could happen again here. And I think that's an overpay. But to me, if you can get him in that $5-6 million range, I'd love to have him back. So my offer for AJ Epenesa would be 2 years, $12 million. If I'm AJ Epenesa, I'm probably going to explore what those other teams have to offer me, and I bet you it's more. So we'll see how that all goes. And I think if you want to play the compensatory pick bingo, this is a contract that you look at. Leonard Floyd is a contract that you look at. Gabe Davis is a contract that you look at as assets that you're going to lose, and you're probably not going to come close to signing enough players for there to not be a net loss. So you're probably looking at, compensatory picks next draft. And this is part of that bingo is AJ Epenesa, Leonard Floyd, and Gabe Davis is a couple of, or 3 big ticket potential free agents that could all get $10+ million a season with their next deal. All right. So Epenesa, 15 games in 2023, 1 start on the field, 41% of the snaps in those 15 games. 20 tackles, 7 for loss, 29 pressures, 6.5 sacks. He also had 2 interceptions. You can't forget about those. He picked off Mahomes, and then the Washington was the pick 6. So a couple of fun interceptions for AJ Epenesa. As for his 2023 review, I think he had another solid season as a rotational defensive end. The rib injury against Kansas City, I think that was pretty impactful in week 14. He wound up missing 2 games and then came back for the last couple of games in the playoffs. And I don't think that he was close to the same trying to play with that rib injury. And I think he's very clearly shown growth as both a pass rusher and a run defender. And I think as a third defensive end, I think he makes a nice impact. What does he look like in a more prominent role if he's a 60+% of the snap guy? I wonder what that looks like. And again, if he comes back for money that the Bills can work with, I think you can look at Epenesa and Rousseau and say, yeah, we got a couple of starters there and young players that you drafted, and you could see what happens there. But it's really just going to come down to the money for AJ Epenesa. So 2024 outlook, the question is he back? I'd rather bring him back than Leonard Floyd, to be honest with you, because it gets us into the younger bucket. And I don't know if it's cheaper, but it's certainly younger, which I like. Again, he's turning 26 years old in September and with 4 years of experience under his belt. So I like that. But again, my fear is the market that's going to exist out there for AJ Epenesa. I think bringing him back would be helpful in maintaining some level of year-over-year continuity. Certainly a player that you drafted. You invested the 54th pick in the draft on him. And so, my appetite for an extension here is fairly warm, but again, if there's $10 million a season out there for AJ Epenesa, which I think there could be, I think that's something you gotta understand if he goes out and takes. All right, we're talking Shaq Lawson, Kingsley Jonathan, and the overall to-do list for Brandon Beane this offseason as it relates to the defensive end position in just a second here, so be sure to stick with me. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 if your first bet of $5 or more wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets. They have live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. They also have some football's futures bets out there that you can get in on. There's always a ton of fun stuff to check out over at FanDuel. The app is awesome and easy to navigate, so check it out. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, a couple more players to get to, and then we'll get to Brandon Beane's checklist here. Shaq Lawson, a 2016 first-round pick by the Bills. Then he left in free agency after the 2019 season, and he's returned each of the last 2 years on one-year contracts. Shaq Lawson is 29 years old. He turns 30 in June. He has completed his one-year, $1.3 million deal and is set to become a free agent. In 2023, he played in 16 games with one start. In those 16 games, he was on the field for 33% of the snaps, collected 13 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 16 pressures, and 1 sack. As for his 2023 review, Shaq Lawson kind of is who he is. He can defend the run. He can contain rush, and I think those are important things, right? Like we're stopping the run and contain rush against a guy like Lamar Jackson, the Patrick Mahomes, guys that can get outside of structure. You love having Shaq Lawson because he's going to help keep them within the pocket. He's inexpensive. He's a reliable player, but he's also a fourth defensive end that's going to be 30 years old this season that offers very little upside. And so I've been a pretty big fan of Shaq Lawson, like not necessarily in terms of who he was as a prospect and meeting the promise of being a first-round pick, but the last couple of years in terms of providing some stability as a rotational end that has a clear set of skills that show up when you put him on the field. I like that about him. But again, 30, no upside. The benefit if you do bring him back is that he's not going to cost you very much. He's a minimum type deal player, which, you know, as you're trying to fill out a roster, you need some of these players, and maybe you want that to be Shaq Lawson. But, you know, if you can get some different options in the building that have some more upside, I'd be fully okay with moving on here and giving some younger, potentially some more dynamic guys with upside more opportunity in 2024 compared to giving 33% of your snaps once again to Shaq Lawson. Last player here is Kingsley Jonathan, a 2022 undrafted free agent. He's 25 years old. He turns 26 in April. He's entering year 2 of his 2-year, $1.9 million contract. In 2023, he played in 16 games with 0 starts, on the field for 11% of the defensive snaps, and he actually played a fair amount on special teams as well. He collected 5 tackles, none for loss, 8 pressures, and 0 sacks. As for his 2023 review, it's tough, right? He only played 97 snaps on the season. 26 of those 97 snaps came in one game against Jacksonville when the Bills didn't have Gregory Rousseau, and it was also Von Miller's first game back, so he was on a pitch count. And he certainly had a couple of occasional flashes, but he's never really commanded playing time. He's never really taken away playing time from a guy like Shaq Lawson. Like I just mentioned, you have an aging Shaq Lawson that has very little upside, and the younger, more upside, more athletic player in Kingsley Jonathan's not taking away snaps from a guy like Shaq Lawson. So he's hard for me to project. I'd love to look at him as this underdog story that's going to have a breakout season and be a nice piece of this Bills defense. But based on what? Based on what? He's there's not enough there for me to point to and say, okay, this guy deserves a massive opportunity, and that's a reliable path for the Bills to get production. I don't know if that's a good way to look at it. So as for the 2024 outlook, he is under contract, which is a big deal. The Bills only have a few guys under contract on the defensive end, Rousseau, Miller, and Kingsley Jonathan. So you're probably going to want 2 or 3 more players added to this mix. And fortunately for Kingsley Jonathan, he's already in the mix. You feel like there's probably going to be some opportunity there. They've held on to him for a few years. And like we've seen some of this happen with other young players that have just kind of been around, whether it's like an Ike Bucker type guy or a Cam Lewis type player, where they're just kind of around for a while and they eventually get a chance and they do decent. Maybe that'll be Kingsley Jonathan. He'll be the next one that does that. He's very athletic. He's 6'3", 260 pounds with 34.5-inch arms. He has a 904 relative athletic score. The perfect score is 10. So he's got great size and athleticism. 4.47 40-yard dash, a 1.61 10-yard split. Those are great times. 34.5-inch vertical jump, 7-second 3-cone. He's an athletic dude. But at the same time, he's entering his age 26 season. He's played 160 snaps in 2 seasons with the Bills. He was with the Bears, and they didn't keep him. They've needed defensive ends. You go back to his college career at Syracuse, he was there for 5 seasons. He started 11 games as a junior, and then he has 2 starts across his other 5 seasons. And the year after he started 11 games, he didn't start any as a senior. So, like, I don't know what to expect from Kingsley Jonathan, but when you look, if your best indicator of future performance is past performance, is a modest player at Syracuse and hasn't really carved out a role for himself in the NFL despite being great size and great athleticism. So he's in the mix. I'm intrigued, but having real expectations for Kingsley Jonathan next year, I don't think you can. And that's tough because I don't think you can have real expectations for Von Miller. I don't think you can have real expectations for Kingsley Jonathan. Well, you've only got one other player under contract, and that's Gregory Rousseau. So you got some stuff to figure out here, Brandon Beane. I will note that you have Cameron Klein, who spent this past season on the practice squad. He signed to a futures contract, so he is in the mix as well. So what do you have? Greg Rousseau, Von Miller, Kingsley Jonathan, and a bunch of expiring contracts. What do you need? I think it's pretty clear. You need to pick up Greg Rousseau's 5th-year option. You need to fervently pray that Von Miller can find his form. You need to check in on AJ Epenesa and see where his market's at. And if you can pull it off, I'd do it. I think you need to draft a player early here, and you might need to draft one early and one late. You might need a couple of rookies here in the mix. And so, to me, defensive end is very much in play for the Bills in the first round at pick 28, and they should pick one, to me, within the first 3 picks. I think it's such a big need. And obviously, free agency will dictate a lot of this, but as we look at it right now, they need to pick a defensive end early in the draft. So a lot to be done here at defensive end. You're going to need 2 or 3 new contracts, potentially some rookie infusions. And boy, oh boy, this would be nice if Von Miller could come back and be Von Miller, right? That's your wild card. That's your X factor. That's your unknown, is what Von Miller can look like. And for as intriguing as that can be, he's also 35 years old and played like garbage this past year. So hopefully just more time removed from the ACL puts him in a better position to be a productive player. So we'll see. All right. We got, I think the hardest conversations have been wide receiver, defensive tackle, and defensive end. So we've gotten through that. We got a big one coming at safety, linebacker, corner, safety. 3 left to do here on this performance review series. We'll certainly get those in this week for you, and then turn our attention to some other topics. So appreciate you being here and appreciate you coming back. So make sure that you are subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.